This episode of the Florida Files contains language that some listeners may find offensive.
The not knowing has been a torture, but that journey's over. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for having the guts to do this. Chief Wagner made the decision to end our pain. We believed for years that Ottis Toole killed Adam.
On December 12, 2008, John and Reve Walsh, along with their 3 children, Megan, Callahan, and Hayden, all born after their brother Adam was murdered 27 years before, gather at the Hollywood Police Department for a national press conference. Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner announces the Adam Walsh abduction and killing case is officially closed.
Consistent with the opinions of investigators past and present, I agree with the ultimate conclusion of this independent investigation that Ottis Toole was the perpetrator of this crime. With the acknowledgement that our investigation placed Ottis Toole in Hollywood, Florida, at or near the time of Adam's abduction, along with the multiple confessions countered by several subsequent recantations, our agency has devoted an inordinate amount of time seeking leads to other potential perpetrators rather than emphasizing Ottis Toole as our primary suspect. One common denominator remains following an additional 12 years of investigating leads and interviewing potential witnesses after the court-ordered disclosure of the investigative files, that the pedophile and convicted murderer, Ottis Toole, has continued to be our only real suspect.
Local 10 and Local10.com present the Florida Files. I'm Michelle Solomon, and this is the story of the disappearance of Adam Walsh.
Today we know.
The answer to the question that's haunted John and Reve Walsh for so long comes following an extensive review of 3 decades of evidence by Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner, who said all fingers point to Ottis Toole, a drifter from Jacksonville and convicted serial killer.
Listening to the words that came off of Chief Wagner's lips just penetrate my soul.
2 weeks after Adam was snatched from the Sears Mall, his severed head was discovered in a canal west of Vero Beach. Detectives never found his body or his killer, but 15 years after his disappearance, Toole told a fellow death row inmate that he was responsible. There were holes in his story. He recanted twice, but Wagner says the circumstantial evidence against him is overwhelming. The announcement was followed by a humble apology to the Walshes, who for years were critical of detectives for misplacing evidence and overlooking important leads. Wagner admits the case should have been presented to the state attorney's office long before Toole died in prison back in 1996. They say the closing of their case is a reaffirmation of their efforts to see that their son didn't die in vain.
Today, the case is closed, and John Walsh is certain Ottis Toole is the killer of his son. He talks to the Florida Files about the almost 3 decades of what he calls torture and misery for his family because of police missteps and the roadblocks in trying to get justice for his son. You're convinced that everything that they said is where he was, what he did, the whole story?
You know, nobody's got it right. Nobody has got it right, and you won't get it right either. Ottis Toole didn't recant his story. He had a dirtbag defense attorney who got paid by the state, and he discounted. He's the one who said that Ottis Toole recanted his story. He played the game. He and Henry Lee Lucas would tell cops, I killed this person, when they didn't, to get out of jail. If you're locked up in a prison, have you ever been in a prison, done any stories about prisons?
Yes.
So it's a horrible place to be. So you tell a dumb, not naive cop, I'll clear your case if you buy me a pizza. Come and get me. Fly me to Armpit, Oklahoma. Get me a Burger King. Big deal. And I'll talk to you as much as I want. Otherwise, he's in jail, hoping that other prisoners won't shank him for being a pedophile. That's what Toole learned from Lucas. Do you have children?
I don't. No.
That'll change your whole life. Reporters like you followed me around for years. Said, why are you so driven? I said, until you have a child, it's a love that you can't explain to anyone. It's not like the death of a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a lover, a husband, whatever the situation. It's a gut-tearing love of a little person and reporters will, and I've had reporters that I've trained, tons of reporters as field reporters, and they'll say, I got married and I had that little boy or that little girl and I go in and kiss them every night, and now I understand why you're so driven, how much you truly love children, because it is unbearable to lose a child, especially in the horrible way that we lost our son to a worthless piece of shit dirtbag.
Thousands of pages of the case were released to the media in 1996 after a contentious court battle in Broward County. John Walsh says it only served to be another bump in the rocky road for the Walshes. In 96, when those newspapers asked to have all those files open, that was a big... Did that cause problems? Because did that hold up the Ottis Toole?
No, because the Hollywood attorney told us that you cannot open up a capital file. They tell a couple, a mother and father, that you'll never get justice for Adam if they open the files. He's protecting the Hollywood PD. He has us convinced that once the files are open, it's public domain, and anything in those files will never be used when they indict Ottis Toole. They'll never be able to use it to convict him. If I knew what I knew now, if I knew so much about the bullshit criminal injustice system, and I'm the guy that named it the criminal injustice system, but they convinced us, the city attorney, that this would be the end of our getting justice for Ottis Toole. And that's why 27 years later, I went to Chad Wagner at Reve's urging. She's the one who spurred the whole thing. She's the one who said, we've got to know. John, you're out saving kids everywhere, you're catching bad guys, you're changing laws everywhere, but we need to know. I went down and spent a fortune bringing lawyers to the Hollywood PD and the dysfunctional idiot detectives who were in charge of it, who lost pieces of evidence. When they confiscated Toole's car, there was a blood-soaked carpet in the back that I'm sure Joe told you that when he finally, Hollywood police never, ever developed the pictures that were at the DA's office with Adam's face imprinted in the blood on the back of that carpet. Hollywood never told us they lost the carpet, that there was no DNA back then. They sent it to different labs, and when Hoffman or whoever lost it, they never told us. How could they do that? And then they lost the car. How do you lose a car of the main suspect? If somebody auctioned it off somewhere. Because I believe that first I started out in a terrible adversarial position with the FBI when they refused to enter Adam's case because they said, oh, that was our policy in 1981. We go after mafia and white-collar crime. And I said, these cops, although some of them are well-intended, they don't have a clue. And I said, you're not even looking. You don't even have a search party here. You don't have anybody looking in the canals in case he fell in it. And this bullshit, he's never walked anywhere. You're saying he might have walked out of that mall somewhere? He's 6 years old. He's never, my wife picked him up from private school, drives him every single day. Wouldn't let him ride his bike in the street. But nobody would help me. Nobody would let us look at the files. The DA wasn't for it until I ran into Chad Wagner. And I went down to see Chad Wagner with Joe Matthews. And I said to Chad Wagner, I said, you know what? You're my last hope. My wife and I need to know if Ottis Toole killed Adam before we go to our grave. I said, I want you to open the files. I've got two guys, Joe Matthews and Kelly Hancock, probably the best DA in the history of Broward County, almost undefeated, who want to look at this pro bono. They're not going to sell it to the National Enquirer. They want to see what happened in Adam's case. And he goes, I said, your city attorney will never agree to it. Nobody wants to open up the mistakes. Nobody wants to have a big, white-hot spotlight to look at the Hollywood PD in 1981 and the subsequent stupid mistakes they made. And he goes, I'll do it. I'll open those files. Mistakes here. They found the security guard. They did in 2 months what the Hollywood PD hadn't done in 27 years. He said, we owe it to you. We owe it to open up those files. And I said, I cannot thank you enough. That's put the end to that. That day, I never thought I would be that emotional, because I know people say, you're tough, you're rough. I'm a human being. That little boy was the light of our lives. He was the most beautiful little boy. He was the kindest, sweetest little kid. And he was decapitated. Who decapitates children? Ottis Toole got lucky because Adam was ordered out of the store. I hope you cover that. We never knew. Goddamn Sears and Roebuck's head of security, when that 17-year-old, and Joe Matthews is the one who found her, and the DA's office found this girl who said, I became an emergency room nurse because I've had nothing but guilt for ordering Adam out of the store. Seeing him there with the 2 Argentine white boys, playing the video game with the 2 black boys, and ordering the white boys out that door, putting him out on the street, and the head of security, although never proven it, and she said it, told me not to tell the cops that I ordered Adam Walsh out of the store. So Reve had no basis to look for Adam. 17-year-old girl, she said I had an abortion 2 days before I was on drugs, that I didn't know what I was doing, and I ordered those boys out, and I never told anybody because they told me not to. How's that to start the story when you're looking for your missing child? And Ottis Toole was a surfer. He liked to surf toy departments looking for children, and it was his luckiest day. And that girl to this day says she regrets it and has terrible guilt and thinks about Adam all the time, ordering a beautiful little boy out there, assuming he was with those 2 other white boys. Really sucks.
I sincerely hope that John and Reve Walsh realize some closure with this decision. Thank you. That's my statement.
Today, the Walsh family, investigators, and law enforcement are satisfied with the closing of the case. That it was Ottis Toole that took Adam from outside of the Sears store, began to drive north in a 1971 white Cadillac to take the boy to Jacksonville and make him his own, but then ended up killing the boy instead. Yet there are others that doggedly continue to this day to prove that someone else was responsible for Adam Walsh's death. Willis Morgan was at the Radio Shack, not far from the Sears store in the Hollywood Mall, the same day Adam was abducted, on July 27, 1981. He's sure he saw the man who took the 6-year-old that day, and he says it wasn't Ottis Toole.
And how many years have you been devoted to this now?
Well, ever since it happened. 37. July will be July 27th, 1981.
When did the frustration really start?
Frustration started when Jeffrey Dahmer was captured. And I saw a little mugshot and a story about this guy that was captured for doing some horrific things up in Milwaukee. And as soon as I saw that mugshot, I knew right away. Because that face was seared into my brain ever since July 27th, 1981. So while I was in Radio Shack, this young, disheveled man came in and started talking to me. My thinking was he was lonely and just wanted someone to talk to at the time. At first I thought it was just some nut job. I didn't realize, but he progressively got more and more dangerous as I didn't speak to him, because I didn't answer him. It was a one-way conversation.
Because you just thought he was weird?
Well, no, I thought once you say something, it initiates more conversation. I didn't want a conversation with this guy. I'm thinking, you don't say nothing, he'll just go away. But he didn't go away. He came right up to me, and he kept trying to initiate conversation.
What do you want to talk about?
The weather. I guess that's the only way he knew how to start a conversation.
Yeah.
You know.
I wonder what was he after? What did he even
well, you know, in hindsight, it's easy to put it together. Back then, like I said, I was thinking it was some nut job that was lonely, wanted someone to talk to. But in hindsight, obviously, now I know what he was after. He wanted my friendship to go somewhere with him or something.
Oh, okay.
Probably back to his hotel room. He did have a hotel room at that time.
So he's trying to pick you up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That encounter was so intense that I just knew somebody was going to be in trouble. Believe me. And I was just wondering what their reaction was going to be with him coming up to them the way he did me. So I went out to the Radio Shack the hallway entrance just to look down the hallway to see what he was doing, because just then he turned to the right into Sears. He went actually into Sears. So I went to the point where he turned, and I was watching him walk all the way to the far west side of Sears, and then he turned right toward the toy department. I went home, and I tried to forget about that crazy guy in the mall, but that evening I was making a sandwich in the kitchen, and I had the TV turn on to one of the local news stations. It might have been your station, I don't remember. I heard on the news, and I heard them say Hollywood Mall. I'm going, Hollywood Mall, wow, that's right down the street here. Then I heard Sears, and I'm going, wow, I was there. Then I heard Abduction. Oh my God, that guy did it. He actually did it. Then they said toy department, they said the time. It was all right. I knew it was that guy. There was absolutely no question. It was that guy. I just
Did
didn't
you
know.
hear that it was a child? Because you...
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you knew that.
And they mentioned the name, but the name didn't mean anything to me. But anyway, I never saw the abduction. But I knew it was that guy. I came right here to this police department, the Hollywood Police Department, and I tried to tell them my story, and I literally walked back out of there by shaking my head, feeling like a jerk for wasting my time walking in there. Because he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. All he wanted was the tag number and the vehicle make, and the description of the vehicle, and I didn't have any of that. I told him this never happened outside the mall. It was all, my total encounter was inside the mall. Jack Hoffman dismissed it back in '81. The reason being, he was so focused on John Walsh's house guest. And as well, 2 years later, they went after Ottis Toole, and they spent so much time chasing all the wrong people. Now that witnesses are coming forward after Jeffrey Dahmer was captured, because I'm not the only one, saying this is the guy, they're dismissing everybody.
So have you ever talked to John Walsh?
No, but my attorney sent him a copy of my book, but he never responds.
Morgan says there are other witnesses who saw the same man he did. For a book he's written about his experience, he's tracked down Mia Cockerman-Taylor, who says she and her brother saw Dahmer at the store the day before and the day Adam disappeared.
Back in, I think it was like 2013, maybe even 2014, I got a call out of the blue from someone actually that Willis was working with. And they had, asked me if I was the same Mia who had a brother named Joel and who was there that day. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was. And they asked me to please take a look at a couple of pictures to see if I recognized the man who I saw that day in, 1981. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. So they emailed me, an array of pictures. And, I chose the person that, I recall seeing that day. And they asked me, are you absolutely sure? I'm like, yeah, that's the guy, scruffiness. And then he had a smell like of stale alcohol on his breath because he was that close, talking to my brother and stuff, which was the day before Adam was kidnapped. And, I explained to them why, I had that memory and everything, and that was definitely the person that I saw that day. And then they told me, they revealed to me who that particular picture was. And, I was in disbelief. And so, it took some time for them to convince me that that's who it was, because I had no idea at that time that that's whose photo I'd selected. Yep.
And who was it?
It was a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer when he was much younger, much heavier.
But there wasn't any police report made, or
no,
you didn't really contact anybody?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. My mom passed away in '95. I know she never saw that news, program where he was on there, because she saw the man too. But she was never able to identify him because no one knew who he was, and she passed away prior to that.
Dahmer comes into the public spotlight in 1991 when it's discovered he's been killing and dismembering victims and saving and storing their body parts. Video is televised around the world of crews in biohazard protection suits taking evidence out of his Milwaukee apartment. And his connection to South Florida also becomes suspect.
The latest lead involves the suspect at the center of more than a dozen gruesome mutilation killings in Milwaukee, Jeffrey Dahmer. A convicted pedophile, Dahmer lived for a time in Miami Beach, the year Walsh was killed. Pictures of children have reportedly been found in his apartment.
We're asking Milwaukee detectives to question Dahmer about the Walsh case. I'm sure it'll be up to them if and when they do it.
But Hollywood police caution that Dahmer presents just one in more than hundreds of leads over the years, and only a circumstantial one at that. At this point, Hollywood detectives say they won't head out to Milwaukee unless they get an indication that Dahmer is connected to the Walsh case. At this point, they don't expect to get any information until next week at the earliest. In Hollywood, I'm Bertha Kumsage, Channel 10, Eyewitness News.
In August 1992, Detective Jack Hoffman visits Dahmer in jail. In police records, pages 2382 to 2422, there's file number 13, a statement dated August 13, 1992. Detective Jack Hoffman is at the Columbia Correctional Facility in Wisconsin to interview Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. Hoffman says, "As I told you earlier, Jeffrey, my main purpose of coming up here is to speak to you about your activities upon your arrival in South Florida." Dahmer talks about sleeping on the beach and getting a job at a place called Sunshine Subs. Hoffman asks Dahmer if he ever went up to the Hollywood Mall. Hoffman mentions a man at the Hollywood Mall, a witness, who says he saw someone that fit Dahmer's description, and that man was wearing fatigues. Dahmer tells Hoffman stories about how he killed and saved body parts of his victims. At the end of the interview, Hoffman tells Dahmer again, "Just to reiterate, my main purpose of coming here for you is the investigation of Adam Walsh, and you go on record to say that you had nothing to do with it." Dahmer says, "Nothing to do with it. I heard it on the news, but I had nothing to do with it. No." True crime author Arthur J. Harris, based in Florida, has written 2 books on the disappearance of Adam and Dahmer's connection to South Florida. He believes that by the police focusing so much on Toole, that they miss leads that would have pointed directly to Dahmer.
When I review the file, the police file, and find the 40-page interview that Dahmer had done with the detective, the original detective on the case, Jack Hoffman, and he gives the name of the place that he had worked, and it was called Sunshine Subs. I go downtown to the Miami-Dade Library and look up the 1981 microfiche to find phone listing. And there it is. Here's the number, 1017040 Collins Avenue, Sunshine Subs Pizza. So now I've got it confirmed. And then I go over to Public Records in Dade County and look up in the indexes anything at all with Sunshine Subs.
So you get the police report, and you hit the jackpot, you get a bingo.
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 So in this police report, we've got the name of the deceased. He's found, just like Ken Halpert told me, by the dumpster. Jeff had told him that, I've been stepping over this guy, when I'm taking out the garbage, by the dumpster, over the past couple of days. Calls the police, they come out, they do a report, and Jeff gives some background about the guy. He was an old homeless man, he said, vagrant, and knew his name, saw enough of his name, and said, he hadn't been feeling well, and he was sleeping in there's an electric room. So the police report says, according to Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer, so this is the first evidentiary proof that anybody's had that Jeff Dahmer had been in Miami at all. And I found a police report from Metro Dade. It was a public safety division, Dade County. That's what it was called in 81. And I have, according to Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer, and the date is 20 days before Adam Walsh disappears. Now, nobody knows in 1981 who the hell Jeff Dahmer is. there were not just 2 witnesses. There were 6 total police witnesses, came to police, who they had dismissed, who when I talked to them and showed them Ottis Toole's pictures, is this the guy you saw at the mall? Nah, that's not the guy. How about this guy? Oh yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy we know. 4 of them were absolutely certain. The other 2 were like, I didn't get that great of a look, but this guy, looking at this picture, one of them said, gives me shivers.
Let me ask you, have you ever talked, has John Walsh ever talked to you? Have you ever talked to him?
No.
He won't talk to you?
I have attempted and been rebuffed. That's what it is, okay? You know, they don't want to talk to me. That's what it is. So, you know, I've just left that alone.
But John Walsh did have a comment for the Florida Files.
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. And the Dahmer stuff is just bullshit. I tell you, and you'll never talk to me again if you spend much time on that, because it's a lie. It's not a fact. I mean, it's yes, you can be all the reporter and you want to cover all sides of it. The public needs to know. But when it's a perpetration, it's just a tabloid grab at some money. They wrote a book about at the expense of a little 6-year-old boy, and threw an investigation off course. I stuck by take the high road, try not to hurt victims, exploit victims, because the media knows all the rules and the victims don't know any of the rules. So they can shove a mic in front of your face as you're crying and dying in broken heart and ask you some really stupid questions. There's no fairness about it. I explored the Dahmer angle. I actually got a letter from the DA's office saying they wouldn't bring Dahmer back to a death penalty state if he agreed to talk to cops. And the 2 FBI agents that interviewed him said, not him. No shape or form.
Former Milwaukee Journal reporter Ann E. Schwartz, who went on to work for the Wisconsin Department of Justice, was the first to report the story of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer in 1991. And she wrote a book about the man dubbed the Milwaukee Cannibal. She and her reporting team at the Journal were nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for their work.
I have 2 people that I've interviewed. That one is a witness, one has written 2 books. Willis Morgan says he was at the Radio Shack and saw who he believes was Jeffrey Dahmer walk towards the Sears store. And then Art Harris has done, taken all those documents that I have from police, and he says he's combed them, and that there were things, we all know that in the Adam Walsh case there were things that were missed. That was part of, even Mark Smith and Joe Matthews tell me, that the investigation just, it was a different time, it was all this stuff. But my 2 witnesses, or my 1 witness and my book writer, say that they don't feel that the Dahmer link was investigated enough.
Michelle, it's not unusual when there's a very high-profile serial killer case that's announced in the news, nationwide, worldwide, that people try to find the connection to something else. That if this person has committed this many crimes, if this person has killed 17 men and boys, then of course we have to see who else he might have killed in a very high-profile case that's still out there. And sometimes you hear people, who want to clear everything from the Lindbergh baby case to, of course, to Adam Walsh. So Jeffrey Dahmer was attracted to every single one of his victims. And I am going by his confession and also the conversations that he had with some of the best forensic psychiatrists in the country that he killed. He never had to kidnap them. He lured them back to his apartment or lured them back to his home or to his grandmother's house. Everything that was alleged to have happened in the Walsh case was completely outside of Dahmer's profile. He was a young boy. He was Caucasian. He was kidnapped from a store. Dahmer did not do any of those things. And again, we're going by his confession, but there's a reason that I believe the confession of Jeffrey Dahmer. And that's because he was, again, according to the forensic psychiatrist, he was ready to confess. He was ready to confess to everything, and he was ready to unburden himself from everything. He confessed to murdering Stephen Hicks in Ohio in 1978 when that state still had the death penalty. He absolutely could have left that out. There were murders that Jeffrey Dahmer confessed to that we would have never known about, but for his confession. I remember when the police from Hollywood, Florida, came up to Milwaukee, and were trying to see whether or not there was any kind of a connection. And Dahmer was adamant that there was no connection to the Adam Walsh murder.
Art Harris had produced this thing for me, this police report that I have about this gentleman that was deceased at a dumpster behind a sub shop. And when the police came out to interview whoever had been in that sub shop that may have known something about it, the investigator has the name as the witness that was one of the people they spoke to as a Jeffrey Dahmer. Mm-hmm. And Art and other folks that are tying Jeffrey Dahmer's time in 1981 at the Sunshine Subs in Sunny Isle, days after Adam disappeared. There is some police report out there where Jeffrey Dahmer is talking about a gentleman, a dead man that's found at a dumpster. Coincidence, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Well, remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about a serial killer who has rituals and who keeps trophies. And one of the things that Jeffrey Dahmer did after he killed his victims was to save a part of them. Now, he believed that he was kind of keeping them close to him when he saved maybe a skull, or he would save something else. The idea of killing someone simply to kill them, again, goes against what Dahmer has confessed and what is believed to be the ritual nature in which he killed people. So, what the common theme really is that Dahmer was attracted to these men, invited them back to his apartment or to his grandmother's home or to wherever to have sex with him. Eventually, they would want to leave, and he did not want them to leave. Every single lead that was possible, having to do with Jeffrey Dahmer's connection to anything. And I understand the rationale for it, as do the Milwaukee police officers who did all this investigation. But the conclusion that they came to here is that Jeffrey Dahmer had no involvement whatsoever in the Adam Walsh case, and I haven't seen any evidence that shows me differently.
But there are other people out there that always have these conjectures or these theories. And I just, I'm an objective reporter, so I don't put myself in any way of where it is. But I'm just curious about that, because there is disclosure that was had in 2008, but then there are other people that surmise different things, and I don't.
Right, and the new chief of police that came into Hollywood Police Department did a great thing. He held a press conference, invited my family and the press, and said, mistakes were made in the past. A former police chief there didn't want to admit the mistakes that he had made in the case. But today, unequivocally, without a doubt, we would convict Ottis Toole for the murder and kidnapping of Adam Walsh.
Since the case was closed in 2008, the Walshes have tried to get on with their lives. As much as can be expected, Reve Walsh tells ABC's Dan Harris in a 2016 interview.
When all this was going on, and I just thought to myself, God, I can't wait, till it's 20 years or 25 years from now. I don't care about getting old. I just want this experience in my life to be that far away from me, because I thought it would be, different, but it's really not.
John and Reve are still married. Callahan tells me that John spends his time playing polo, a Walsh family tradition, with his youngest son Hayden, and loves being a grandfather. Reve remains active in her work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
And they've had issues in the past and have thankfully gotten over them and have stayed together. I think I don't know the official stat, but it's something crazy like 90% of couples who have a missing child divorce within the first year and don't stay together. And so it's a real testament that my parents have stayed together this long. I think the birth of my sister after Adam's abduction was one of the main reasons my parents did stay together. They had this beautiful new baby girl that they needed to take care of and bring into this world, and I think she might have been the saving grace, actually.
And John Walsh is getting ready to open another chapter in his TV career.
I heard you're going to be doing a new show on Discovery ID.
I'm coming out of retirement. The FBI and the marshals have been driving me crazy. They said, John, think about it. You caught 1,422 guys that nobody could catch. You caught 17 off the FBI's 10 most wanted. You were never a cop. You recovered 61 stranger abducted missing children. We need you to come out. There are so many creeps out there. I've got 2 beautiful new grandchildren that I love and worship and spend time with them. And I'm old, and but I'm coming back because there are so many horrible guys, and there's so many cases out there that are unsolved. There is so much pain in this country. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to create some paranoia. America is so much worse and so much more violent than when I started back in 1987. And I just was hoping that I could catch a couple of pedophiles. The people have supported me. They've helped me pass bills. I've got the Adam Walsh Act, the Missing Children's Bill, the creation of the National Center. All were because of the public. All the successes of America's Most Wanted were because of the public. Because people said, we're sick of it. We want to see victims get justice. We want to see these dirtbags off the street. And we know these laws need to be passed. And that's Adam's legacy. The public has been so incredibly supportive of Reve and I. And that somehow, with all these challenges, we stayed together.
And I can't ever put myself in somebody else's shoes, but I would think, here's a brother who you never met. Your parents are for probably 20 years of your growing up, still really don't have a closure on the case. Mm-hmm. So I just wondered what that was like.
Well, again, you're right. I grew up with this tragedy, and of course it wasn't easy, but we celebrated Adam's life. There wasn't a moment that I can recall where my parents just sat me down and told me about Adam. I always knew I had this brother. We celebrated his birthday. We mourned the anniversary of his disappearance. I knew his favorite sports and his favorite movies, baseball and Star Wars. I grew up with my parents telling me we need to make sure that Adam didn't die in vain, and if his song is to continue, then we must do the singing.
Search is centered around the Hollywood Mall.
But we feel at that point that little Adam was probably searching for his mother.
Some of the volunteers are tired, a few are discouraged, but they say their search will continue through the night.
Others took off in four-wheel drive vehicles. The ride is bumpy and the terrain is rough. Searchers are panning through a wooded section, trying to cover more ground than those on foot.
Over the years, police have ruled out many suspects, among them 2 family friends and serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer.
At a Friday night news conference, police said Toole has confessed to 35 to 50 other murders.
The not knowing is almost as bad as the murder, but today's a good day. Today's a wonderful day. We can end this chapter of our lives.
Do you wish Ottis Toole was alive today?
I'm not about revenge. We never have been. I don't believe in vigilantism. I believe wherever he is paying and being held accountable for his actions. Who could kill a 6-year-old boy? But I've been involved in thousands of cases since then. I believe that Ottis Toole is probably getting what he deserves. Somewhere.
Adam Walsh was born on November 14, 1974, disappeared on July 27, 1981. Today, he would be 43 years old. When I first began looking at this case to profile on the Florida Files, I didn't know so many twists and turns existed, and the magnitude of this story. While podcasts afford a luxury of time that television stories do not, there are still constraints in providing each and every detail of a case like the disappearance of Adam Walsh. So I tried to make sense of it, step by step, by talking to some of the people who lived it, who had been part of it in one way or another, either close to the story or by some 6th degree of separation. Some people wanted to talk about what happened then, and others, like former Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner, said he really didn't have anything new to add to the story. He told me everything he had to say was revealed at that press conference back in 2008. Through it all, one truth remains, that what happened almost 40 years ago, when a little boy vanished after a trip to the mall with his mother, remains one of Florida's most perplexing mysteries, and no doubt it forever will. Join me, Michelle Solomon, for the next edition of the Florida Files as I go step by step through another high-profile case that grips South Florida. Coming soon. Are you a fan of the Florida Files? Please leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere that you get your favorite podcast. Get more of the story through archive videos and online extras on the Florida Files page at local10.com.